All right, today we are diving into something massive. A story about a high-stakes gamble between two of the biggest rivals in tech history that could literally change everything we know about AI. This is the Silicon Realignment.
I mean, think about it. For as long as most of us have had a smartphone, it's been Apple versus Google. That's been the main event, right? The defining rivalry of our time. A total clash of titans. And really, a clash of philosophies.
And it all comes down to their core DNA. On one side, you've got Apple's famous walled garden. Everything is proprietary, isolated. They control every single piece of the puzzle. And on the other side, Google. Totally different playbook. Their whole thing is an open ecosystem, built on partnerships, and getting their software on as many devices as possible. Which brings us to the big, almost unbelievable question that this whole story revolves around. Why on earth would Apple, the ultimate control freaks, suddenly decide to hand over the brains of Siri to their biggest rival? That's what we're here to figure out.
Okay, so let's dig into our first section, the unthinkable alliance. And I want to be clear, this is not just some run-of-the-mill business deal. This is like the ground shifting beneath Silicon Valley.
And this quote, man, it just says it all. For decades, Apple's internal motto was basically, if we didn't build it ourselves, it's not good enough. This deal, it marks the death of that entire way of thinking. It's a huge, pragmatic pivot.
And just so we're on the same page, this is not just Apple licensing a Google app. The source material calls it a foundational collaboration. We're talking a deep technical realignment, embedding Google's Gemini AI right into the very core of Apple's operating system.
So, why? Why would Apple do this? Well, that brings us to the part of the story they probably hoped would never get out, Section 2, Apple's secret AI crisis. It turns out this deal wasn't really a choice. For Apple, it was an absolute necessity.
And it all comes down to this one single number, 33%. Just let that sink in. According to Apple's own internal data, right before this deal, Siri was failing 1 out of every 3 times you used it. In the age of ChatGPT, that's not just bad. That is an existential crisis.
And this table really gives you the before and after. Look at the jump in complexity, from 150 billion parameters to 1.2 trillion with Gemini. That is an 8x leap in raw brain power. And it's expected to slash that awful failure rate down to under 10%. You're going from a clunky rule-based system to a smart AI that can actually do things for you.
So you might be asking, how does a company as famously stubborn as Apple make a U-turn this big? Well, a huge part of it was this guy, Amar Subramanya. They brought in a veteran from Google and Microsoft to run their AI teams. His hiring was the first real sign that Apple was finally ready to admit they needed outside help. Okay, but the elephant in the room, privacy, right? This is Apple we're talking about. Well, this is where it gets really clever. They built this hybrid system. Simple stuff happens right there on your phone. The more complicated questions get sent to Apple's own secure servers. And here's the genius part. The Gemini AI runs inside Apple's cloud. It's sandboxed, meaning your personal data never ever touches a Google server. Okay, so we've got the tech, we've got the strategy, now let's follow the money. Section 3, the $4 trillion deal. This is all about how Wall Street immediately got just how massive this partnership really was. And the reaction was immediate and huge. Alphabet's market cap just shot up, breaking the $4 trillion mark for the first time ever. And why? Because in one move, Google had just locked down the single most valuable piece of real estate on the planet, over 2.2 billion Apple devices.
But this was a two-way street. What did Apple get out of it? Well, for them, this deal was seen as the missing piece of the puzzle. By finally solving its embarrassing AI problem, Wall Street suddenly saw a clear runway for Apple to become the world's first $5 trillion company. It basically erased the biggest question mark hanging over the stock. But, this massive win for Google, it doesn't come cheap, not even close. The company thinks it's going to have to spend up to $93 billion on new data centers and servers just to handle the insane flood of queries that's about to come from every iPhone on the planet.
A deal this big creates waves, huge waves that hit everyone else. And that's what we're looking at next, AI's new battlefield. This alliance didn't just make a splash, it completely redrew the map for every other major player out there.
And this table just breaks down the new world order. Look at this. Google is now the foundational layer for AI on the world's 2 biggest mobile platforms. OpenAI? Suddenly they're just an optional extra, a secondary choice. Microsoft's Copilot loses its edge on mobile. And Amazon's Alexa? Oof! It's now facing a serious risk of becoming totally irrelevant. It's a complete reshuffle of the deck. And yeah, let's just focus on OpenAI for a second. The phrase that came out of this, code red. And that's not an exaggeration. For them, this is an existential threat. They went from being the king of the hill in AI to maybe just another forgotten app on the iPhone. Okay, so when you have two of the biggest companies on the planet joining forces like this, you just know who's going to come knocking, right? That leads us straight into our next section, a collision with regulators. The ink on this deal wasn't even dry before watchdogs around the world started sounding the alarm.
And yeah, they are getting hit from every angle imaginable. You've got the Department of Justice in the US looking into it, the European Union is coming at them with its powerful Digital Markets Act, and the FTC is worried about a monopoly. This partnership is going to be under a microscope for years.
And here's the kicker. This isn't happening in a vacuum for the regulators either. They've seen this movie before. This new AI deal is built right on top of that $20 billion a year deal that made Google the default search on iPhones, a deal that a judge already ruled was an illegal monopoly. So yeah, they are on high alert.
All right, enough about multi-trillion-dollar companies and regulators. Let's bring this all back home. What does this actually mean for you, for the phone in your pocket?
Get ready, because the next iPhones are going to be a whole different beast. Starting with the iPhone 18, they're being designed from the ground up for AI. We're talking brand new chips, specialized memory to make AI responses feel instant, and yes, bigger batteries to actually power all this stuff. And it's all leading up to the very first iPhone Fold, which will be pitched as the ultimate AI device.
And so, here we are. The silicon realignment is done. The two biggest rivals have joined forces, the tech is in place. But after all the drama and all the billions of dollars, will this finally give us the smart, helpful assistant we were promised when Siri first showed up over a decade ago?